There is a specific kind of pain that nobody really talks about. Not the pain of losing something, not the pain of failing at something specific, but the pain of simply not knowing. Not knowing which direction to go. Not knowing what comes next. Not knowing if the path you were on was ever the right one to begin with. That feeling of being lost. And here is what makes it particularly hard. The world we live in has no patience for it. Everything around you is moving with certainty. People your age seem to know exactly what they are doing. Social media is full of people who have figured it out, who have the plan, who are executing, who are arriving, and you are standing still. Unsure, foggy, directionless. And so you add shame to the lostness. Because in this world, not knowing where you are going feels like a personal failure. Like something is wrong with you specifically. But what if that is completely backwards? What if the feeling you have been ashamed of is actually the most important thing that has ever happened to you spiritually? What if Allah uses this specific feeling, this exact disorientation, to do something in the heart that nothing else can do? That is what today is about. Not a motivational push to figure out your direction faster. Not a list of steps to find your purpose. Something more honest than that. A real look at what is actually happening when you feel lost. What Allah is doing in that space. And why the people who stop fighting that feeling and start listening to it are the ones who find something real on the other side of it. Stay with this. Because what you are feeling right now may not be a problem to solve. It may be an invitation to something you have been waiting for your whole life without knowing it. Let us start with something honest. The reason feeling lost hurts as much as it does is not just the uncertainty itself. It is what you have been taught uncertainty means. From the time you were young, you were given a map. Go to school, choose a path, build towards something, have a plan, know your 5-year goal, know your 10-year goal. Have an answer ready when someone asks what you are doing with your life. The entire structure of modern life is built around one assumption. A person should always know where they are going. Certainty equals competence. Direction equals worth. If you do not have a clear path, you are somehow behind, somehow failing. And so when the fog comes, when the path disappears or falls apart or turns out to lead somewhere you never wanted, you do not just feel lost. You feel like something is wrong with you. That is the trap. Not the feeling of being lost, the meaning you have attached to it. Because here is what the world does not tell you. Most of the people who look certain from the outside are performing certainty. They have learned that certainty is what gets rewarded socially. That having an answer sounds better than admitting you do not know. And so they perform. And you watch the performance. And you compare your insides to their outsides. And the comparison makes the lostness feel even more isolating than it already was. We are living in a time where we consume more images of other people's certainty, arrival, and success than any generation before us. And we are lonelier and more directionless than any generation before us. Those two things are not unrelated, but step back for a moment. Think about the people in history whose lives actually meant something. The ones whose stories are still being told. Were their lives defined by constant certainty and clear direction? Or were they defined by moments of profound disorientation? Moments that turned out to be the pivots on which everything meaningful turned? You already know the answer. The most significant turning points in any life rarely look significant from the inside. They look like confusion. They look like loss. They look like standing in the middle of a road that just ended, with no signpost in sight. This is where Islam offers something the modern world simply cannot. Not a better productivity system, not a cleaner 5-year plan, A completely different question. The world asks, where are you going? Islam asks, who are you returning to? And that shift from destination to return changes everything about how you understand the feeling of being lost. Because if the goal is a destination, then not knowing where you are going is a crisis. But if the purpose is return, then the moment you lose your way in the world is precisely the moment you are most likely to find your way back to Allah. And that is not a crisis. That is an opening. There is something uncomfortable worth being honest about. A significant part of the pain of feeling lost comes from the ego. Not ego in the arrogant sense, not ego as a flaw unique to you, but ego in the simple, honest sense. The part of you that believed it was in control. Think about how most of us approach our lives. We plan, we work, we build, we make decisions based on our best understanding of how things work, and when things go according to plan, we feel good, capable, in control. And quietly, without ever consciously deciding this, we begin to believe that the outcomes of our lives are primarily a product of our effort, our intelligence, our ability to navigate correctly. We do not say this out loud. We know theologically that Allah is in control. We say Insha'Allah, we say Alhamdulillah, we say the right things. But underneath the words, the operating belief is often this: if I plan well enough, if I work hard enough, if I make the right decisions, then I can determine where my life goes. And then something happens that the plan did not account for. Something that all the effort and intelligence and careful navigation could not prevent. Something that reminds you in the most direct possible way that you were never actually in control. And the ego, the part of you that believed it was running things, has nothing left to hold on to. That is what the feeling of being lost often actually is. Not just confusion about direction, it is the specific pain of a self-reliant heart discovering the limits of its own self-reliance. And here is the important thing to understand. That discovery is not a punishment, it is a gift, a painful one. One that does not feel like a gift while it is happening, but a gift nonetheless. Because a heart that genuinely believes it is in control will never fully surrender to Allah. Not because it does not want to, but because surrender requires acknowledging that something greater than you is holding the wheel. And as long as your own hand feels firmly on the wheel, the surrender stays theoretical. Something you believe in, something you intend to practice, something you will really lean into when things get hard, and then things get hard. And you discover that leaning into it is completely different from knowing about it. This is the difference between knowledge of trust in Allah and the lived experience of it. You can understand it perfectly well while life is comfortable. You can explain it. You can teach it. You can feel genuinely confident that you have it. And then the plan fails. And the certainty disappears. And you discover that what you had was knowledge about trusting Allah. What you are being given now, in this uncomfortable, disorienting season, is the actual thing. Not the concept, the lived reality. The heart that has been through this. The heart that has had its self-reliance stripped away and discovered that Allah was there. That the ground held even when everything felt groundless. That heart trusts differently from that point forward. Not the trust of someone who has never been tested. The trust of someone who has been to the edge and found that Allah was already there. That trust is unshakable in a way that comfortable trust never is. And it only becomes available on the other side of exactly what you are going through right now. So the question worth sitting with is not, how do I get my certainty back? The question is, what is being built in me in the absence of it? Because something is being built in the silence, in the fog, in the uncomfortable space between who you were when you had the plan and who you are becoming now that the plan is gone. Something real is being built. And it could not have been built any other way. There is a word in Islam that gets mentioned often, but rarely felt deeply, tawakkul. Most people translate it as trust in Allah, and that is correct. But the translation does not fully capture what tawakkul actually is when you are living inside it. Tawakkul is not passive waiting. It is not sitting still and hoping things improve. It is not spiritual resignation dressed up as faith. Tawakkul is active trust. It is the state of a heart that is fully engaged in doing what it can while simultaneously being fully released from the weight of the outcome. Your hands move. Your heart rests. That is tawakkul. And the feeling of being lost is actually one of the most powerful doorways into it. Because tawakkul in theory is one thing. Tawakkul when you have no other option is something else entirely. Think about what happens when you have run out of plans, when you have tried the obvious things, when you have asked the people you trust, when you have thought it through from every angle you can see, and still the fog remains, still the direction is unclear, still you do not know which way to move. That moment, that specific moment of having exhausted your own resources, that is the moment tawakkul becomes real. Because in that moment, you are not choosing to trust Allah instead of trusting yourself. You are discovering that trusting yourself was never the foundation you thought it was. And Allah was always the only real option. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and whoever relies upon Allah, then He is sufficient for him. Indeed, Allah will accomplish His purpose. He will accomplish His purpose. Not might, not possibly, will. The person who has genuinely handed their affair to Allah is not waiting for a maybe. They are resting in a certainty, not the certainty of knowing what comes next. The certainty of knowing who is holding what comes next. And that is a completely different relationship with uncertainty. Most people experience uncertainty as a void. A space where the answer should be but is not yet. An uncomfortable gap between where they are and where they need to be. But the person with real tawakkul experiences uncertainty differently. They experience it as a held space. A space that is not empty, but full of Allah's planning. Full of His knowledge. Full of something being prepared that they cannot see yet, but that they trust is coming. The fog is the same, but what the fog contains has changed completely. Now here is what tawakkul looks like practically when you are lost. It does not look like doing nothing. It looks like doing everything available to you and then releasing the outcome completely. You make the dua, you take the step that seems right, you ask for guidance, you move forward with the best information you have. And then you let go, not with resignation, with trust. There is a profound difference between those two things. Resignation says, I give up. I cannot control this, so I will stop trying. Trust says, I have done what I can. The rest belongs to Allah. And I genuinely believe He is sufficient for what I cannot do myself. One closes the heart, the other opens it. And an open heart in the middle of uncertainty is a heart that can receive what Allah is trying to give it. Which brings us to what Allah is actually doing in the space of your lostness. Because He is doing something. He always is. There is something that happens before every major turning point. Something nobody warns you about. Something that feels completely wrong when it is happening. Everything you were holding on to stops working. The plan stops making sense. The certainty disappears. The thing you were relying on for direction and stability stops being reliable. And you are left holding nothing. Most people experience this as pure loss. The ground giving way beneath them. But there is another way to see it entirely. What if the ground giving way was not Allah abandoning you? What if it was Allah removing something that was never meant to be your ground in the first place? Think about what we actually anchor ourselves to in this life. We anchor to plans. to careers, to identities built around what we do, to a version of the future we have decided is the right one, to our own understanding of how things should go. And for a while, these anchors hold. They give us a sense of stability and direction and purpose. But they are not real anchors. They are temporary ones. And temporary anchors were never designed to hold a soul permanently. As long as the temporary anchors are holding, most of us do not reach for the real one. We do not need to. We have something that feels stable enough, so we stay there, living at a distance from Allah that we would never consciously choose, but that we maintain without realizing it because nothing has forced us to look up yet. And then something shifts. The anchor fails. The plan collapses. The certainty evaporates. And suddenly you are reaching not for the next temporary thing, because in that moment of total groundlessness, sometimes there is nothing else to reach for. You reach upward, and that reaching, that desperate, honest, upward reaching of a heart that has run out of other options, that is exactly what Allah was waiting for. Not because He is cruel, not because He enjoys watching you struggle, but because He knows something about you that you sometimes forget about yourself. You were not built to be anchored to this world. You were built for something permanent, something that does not shift or fail or disappear. And as long as the temporary things were doing an adequate enough job of holding you, you were not going to reach for what was always meant to be your real foundation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes empties your hands of everything you were holding so that you will finally reach for Him completely. Not one hand, both. The person who has options reaches with one hand while keeping the other on what they already have, just in case. A partial reach, a hedged surrender. But the person who has nothing left reaches with everything. And that total reaching, that complete turning toward Allah with nothing held back and nothing held onto, produces a connection that partial reaching never could. Now think about what this means for the feeling of being lost. The disorientation you are experiencing is not random. It is not meaningless suffering with no purpose behind it. It is redirection. Allah is moving you from something temporary towards something permanent. From anchors that were always going to fail you toward the only anchor that never will. And the path between those two places runs directly through the fog you are in right now. You are not stuck in the middle of nowhere. You are in the middle of the journey. And the destination is closer than it has ever been. So what does it actually look like to anchor yourself in Allah when everything else has fallen away? This is the practical question. And it deserves a practical answer. It starts with a shift in what you are asking. Most of us, when we feel lost, spend our energy asking one question. What should I do next? Where should I go? Which direction is right? We are searching for a map, for a clear step, for something external that will resolve the internal fog. And that search is not wrong. Taking steps is part of how trust in Allah works. You move, you try, you do what is available to you. But the deeper question, the one that actually anchors you while the external picture is still unclear, is not about direction at all. It is about identity. Not where am I going, but who am I? And the answer Islam gives to that question is the most stabilizing thing a lost heart can hold on to. You are a servant of Allah. That is who you are. Not your job title, not your relationship status, not your 5-year plan, your achievements, or your clarity about the future. A servant of Allah, created by Him, known completely by Him, loved by Him in a way that does not depend on you having it all figured out. That identity does not change when the plan fails. It does not disappear when the fog rolls in. It does not require you to know where you are going in order to be fully intact. You are His right now, in the fog, with the uncertainty still present and the answers still unclear. And a heart that is anchored in that truth moves through uncertainty differently. It does not need the fog to lift before it can function. It does not need the path to be clear before it can take the next step. It does not need the external picture to resolve before it can find peace in the present moment. Because the peace is not in the picture. The peace is in the relationship. Now practically, how do you build that anchor when you are in the middle of the storm? You return to the basics. Not because the basics are simple, but because they are the things that keep the heart connected to Allah when everything else is unclear. Your prayer, 5 times a day. Not as an obligation to rush through, as 5 moments of stopping the spiral and standing before Allah, bringing the fog with you, bringing the uncertainty with you. Standing there honestly and saying, Ya Allah, I am here. I do not know where I am going, but I am here with you right now. That is enough. That one act of showing up consistently, of bringing your lost self before Allah 5 times every day, builds something in you over time that no amount of external clarity could build. Your dhikr, the remembrance of Allah in the small moments, not grand spiritual experiences, just the quiet, consistent turning of the heart toward Him throughout the day, in the car, in the kitchen, in the moments between one thing and the next. Verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. Not in the answer, not in the clarity, not in finally knowing which direction to go. In the remembrance of Allah. That ayah was not written for people who have everything figured out. It was written for exactly this moment. For the person in the fog, for the heart that is searching, for the soul that needs an anchor and cannot find one in any direction it looks. The anchor is dhikr. The anchor is prayer. The anchor is returning to Allah again and again and again in the small moments of every ordinary day. And here is what that consistent returning builds over time. It builds a heart that is no longer dependent on external certainty for internal peace. A heart that can be fully present in the fog without being destroyed by it. A heart that holds the uncertainty without the uncertainty holding it. That is what it means to be anchored in the eternal. Not having all the answers. Not seeing the full picture. Not knowing exactly where you are going. Just knowing who you belong to. And finding that that is enough, more than enough. It is everything. We have come a long way today. From the shame of feeling lost to understanding what that feeling actually is and what Allah is doing inside it. Let me leave you with 3 things, simple ones, worth carrying with you. The first, feeling lost is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that Allah is removing what was never meant to hold you permanently. The fog is not punishment, it is preparation. Something real is being built in you right now. In the silence, in the uncertainty, in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. The second, tawakkul is not passive resignation. It is active trust. You do what you can. You take the steps available to you. And then you release the outcome completely to the one who sees every possible path and knows which one leads to what your soul actually needs. That release is not weakness. It is the most powerful thing a human heart can do. The third, the question was never where are you going? It has always been who are you returning to? And that question has an answer available to you right now. In the fog, in the uncertainty, in the middle of everything that feels unclear, you are a servant of Allah. You are returning to Him. And that is enough to take the next step. Before we close, let me make dua for you, for me. For every heart that came here today carrying the weight of not knowing. Ya Allah, you are Al-Hadi, the one who guides. And we need your guidance now more than we have ever needed anything. Ya Allah, for every heart that is lost right now. Every person who woke up this morning not knowing which direction to face. Every soul carrying the shame of uncertainty in a world that rewards certainty. Meet them here, in this moment. Let them feel that you are closer to them in their lostness than they have ever felt you in their certainty. Ya Allah, remove from us the anchors that were never meant to hold us, the plans we clung to instead of you, the certainty we built on our own understanding instead of yours. Remove them gently, but remove them. And fill those empty hands with something real, with you. Ya Allah, make our prayer our anchor. Make our dhikr our peace. In the moments when the fog is heaviest and the direction is most unclear, draw us back to you again and again, as many times as it takes. Ya Allah, shift our question. From where are we going to who are we returning to? Let return to you be the purpose that makes every other uncertainty bearable. Because as long as we are moving toward you, we are never truly lost. Ya Allah, for the hearts that came here today feeling broken by the fog, let this be the moment something shifts. Not necessarily the circumstances, but the heart carrying them. Give them the peace that comes only from you. The peace that does not require the answer to arrive first. And Ya Allah, when the direction finally becomes clear, when the fog lifts and the path appears, let us look back at this season with gratitude. Because it was here that we finally reached for you with both hands. And it was here that you were waiting. If something in this reminder reached you today, if something shifted even slightly, then it was meant for you. You are not alone in this. And you are not as lost as you feel. Leave a word below. Simply say, Alhamdulillah. And if you want more reminders like this, stay with us. Subscribe. So the next one finds you before the next fog does.